Flosstube. Welcome to this extra video on how to dye chenille trim. This is the yarn that I used, burnout blanket. It comes with 220 yards. I have used quite a bit, but it's because I've been trying this dyeing and it is very, very fun. Here are two colors that I did yesterday. There's a little purple on my nails. I apologize. We're just going to go with it. I should wear gloves. Yes, I should. You can leave that in the comments, but I probably will not wear them, even if you leave that comment. So just don't watch too closely. This is a dye I will show you in a minute. 1 cup of water, 1 cup of dye, 1 teaspoon of dye. Don't put a cup of dye. 1 cup of water, 1 teaspoon of dye. No salt. This is 1 cup of water, 1 teaspoon of dye with a teaspoon of salt. The color is a little bit deeper. You see that in comparison? Then I also tried a cup of dye, a teaspoon of salt with some extra dye, about 1.5 teaspoons. These are very similar, but this one has dye a little bit darker. Then I used a synthetic dye. 1 cup of water, a teaspoon of dye, no salt. Cup of water, a teaspoon of dye with salt. Right away, again, you can see that it's a deeper color. Then I did 2 teaspoons of dye in a cup of water with a teaspoon of salt. This one, maybe it's a teeny tiny bit different. I don't think it's enough difference to tell, like which one is which. Well, hopefully we don't have to retape this because I'm not exactly sure. Something like that, maybe. So what colors did I use? Well, this all-purpose dye, you would think was pink, right? Actually, this is RIT liquid dye in purple. Not quite what you'd expected. This one you would expect it to be a purple, and it was, but it's the synthetic royal purple. So if you're just dyeing for experimentation's sake, like I was the first time, you may not have noticed that some will dye in a completely different color than on the label. And if you're going for a certain color, you might want to use a synthetic so it dyes much more closely to the original color or intended color. So when I get ready to dye, I cut lengths of this with my handy dandy broken, but you know, just use this side, and I'll put it here, wrap, 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 cut. That gives me 6 wraps or 12 feet, and that's the length that I dye. So remove this. I have heated a cup of water in each of these glass jars. I just recycle from pantry. I've used this for yellow, for blues, for purples, over and over. This one doesn't tell you what colors I've dyed in it previously, but glass jars, great way to recycle and to, where was I going with that? That's a good question. Okay, just use glass jars. Recycle them, buy them new, however you want to do it. Heat your water or run it straight from your tap as hot. I measured 1 cup for each of these for tutorial purposes. Here is 12 feet of my chenille. Just kind of lay it together like that in a little bundle. I also warm that. There are 2 little bundles in here. There's one, there's the other. So let's prep our dye really fast. For this tutorial, I will be using a synthetic because I'm going for the actual color of blue here. Kentucky Sky. This is one of my favorite dyes to use. This is not a new bottle. Make sure you shake it. I'm going to put, actually, really quick because I don't want to use 2 teaspoons. Let's go ahead and add a teaspoon of salt to our second jar. It could be your first jar. It can be your only jar. Whatever. This is just how I did it yesterday, so as not to confuse myself, I'm going to put my teaspoon of salt in the second jar. And that's just table salt. Right, Kentucky Sky. I'm going to put a teaspoon in this first jar. And a teaspoon in the very cloudy salt water jar. So, I do have paper towels down just in case I spill or if I want to set my measuring spoon down. Okay, this is Kentucky Sky. Now pick up your warm. You've heated this trim. Hopefully it's not so hot that you can't touch it. We're just going to drop it in. Make sure it gets fully submerged. Alright, second one. Remove excess water. This is so scientific. Alright, there we go. You can leave them as long as you want to. I didn't notice a difference when I was dyeing the first time between 2 minutes and 2 hours. If you want to experiment more with that, you are welcome to, of course. For this tutorial here, we're just going to reposition and show you the rinse. A couple of minutes, I'm going to rinse the dye from my trim, my yarn, my chenille, however fancy you want to get with that name. If I'm going to reuse the dye, I'll just squeeze it right back into my jar. Saves on dye. Otherwise, you can just pour it out. You will lose a lot of color when you rinse. You should not lose all of the color, but you will lose a significant amount of color. You can rinse it on hot, you can rinse it on cold, whatever floats your boat. Kentucky Sky is kind of an aqua type of blue, and the aqua is really coming out here. Looks good. All right. This is our finished color. It is a very light aqua-y mint type of color. And this is the no salt version, so I'm going to set that over here on the towel to dry. And here is our salt mix. Still 1 cup water, a teaspoon of dye. You can already tell this one's a different type of color. It's amazing how the salt affects it. You know, I think I forgot to give these a little swish to stir them. Well, it doesn't seem to be affecting it, so there we go. Hot or cold water. Curious to see how closely these match. I did not experiment with salt in the beginning, just amount of dye and dyeing time. So. It's still clear. I remove the excess water, fluff it a little, and set it on the towel to dry. Here are our Kentucky Sky dyes. It is turned out much more of a minty type of green than this aqua we see on the bottle. This is no salt, and they are still wet, so we have water spots there. It will probably take them several hours to dry unless we take them outside. It's a beautiful day. Then they might dry more quickly. You have a little bit more depth of color here with the salt than you did without. Same as in the pinks, which was dyed with purple, and here in the royal purple synthetic. So yeah, have fun with it. Experiment on amount of dye. You can play with lengths of dye time, different colors, of course. It's great if you need pastel colors. These are all very springy, Eastery colors I love, so I really enjoy this method. It's quick, it's easy. Enjoy. Hello Flosstube, welcome to my extra video on how to dye. Hello Flosstube, welcome to this extra video on how to dye chenille trim.